She's barefoot, draped in a silk caftan. Her eyes are lined in kohl, lips parted ever so slightly. A warm breeze sweeps across the rooftop of a Moroccan palace. This photo, taken in 1969, freezes Talitha Getty in time. The billionaire heiress, the it girl of her era, the queen of bohemian chic. Everyone wanted to either be her or close to her. That one photo defined an entire generation's idea of glamour. But the camera couldn't capture what came next, because barely 2 years later, Talitha was found slumped in a bathroom in Rome. She was just 30, her body cold, a needle nearby. Turns out, the girl on the rooftop, who looked like she owned the world, couldn't even hold on to herself in the end. How did she ever get to that edge? Pole was born into a world of color, music, and canvas. Her father was Willem Pole, a Dutch painter. Her mother died when she was just a child, and her stepfather was an Italian artist who raised her surrounded by books, oils, and ideas. This wasn't the cold, quiet kind of rich. It was the barefoot in a studio kind of childhood, messy and creative. She didn't grow up with castles and chauffeurs like most thought, but she carried herself like royalty. Her beauty was impossible to ignore. Long limbs, dreamy eyes, and a face you could sketch from memory. Wherever she went, people stared. Some said she looked like a fairy tale princess lost in a modern world. But Talitha never tried too hard. She was always just floating. As a teenager, Talitha moved to Paris, a city that looked more like a painting than a place. She was only 16 or 17 when she arrived, wide-eyed and quietly daring. She studied acting at the Conservatoire, immersing herself in the discipline of breath, movement, and presence. She spoke French with the same ease she wore silk. People said she moved like smoke, light, fluid, untouchable. She could sit silently in a room and still be the most interesting person in it. Even then, her beauty was disarming, but it wasn't loud. It was the kind of beauty that made you blink twice, as if unsure whether you were seeing a person or a dream. Photographers loved her because she never looked directly at the lens. She always seemed to be glancing just past it, like she was hearing music no one else could hear, like she knew a secret she wasn't telling. She became a muse without trying. People projected meaning onto her silence. That was her life, mystical, moody, full of promise, until Rome. Until John Paul Getty Jr. happened.
Think I'm coming down, and I'm all strung out on heroin, on the wrong side of town.
They met in Italy, a place where romance clings to every crumbling wall. She was acting in a film. He was drifting through Europe, the quiet son of the richest man in the world. John Getty wasn't like other heirs. He wasn't flashy or loud. He was introspective, gentle, a bit lost. The kind of man who might speak in whispers at a party full of shouting. He had inherited billions, but he wore it like a burden, and that, strangely, made him interesting. Talitha was all warmth and instinct. John was all shadow and hesitation. Together, they made a perfect contradiction. The golden girl and the melancholy prince. They saw something in each other that the rest of the world missed, or maybe just ignored. Within months, they were inseparable. They married in 1966 in a quiet ceremony. Talitha went from art circles to an oil dynasty overnight. But this wasn't some cold corporate marriage. It was champagne on rooftops, hashish in Tangier, and breakfast served in 5 languages. They bounced between London, Paris, and Rome. Their guest lists included Mick Jagger, Marianne Faithfull, Yves Saint Laurent. Their idea of a weekend getaway? India. And they didn't just rent homes, they bought fantasies. Most famously, a crumbling 19th century palace in Marrakesh, where the air was always heavy with spice and sandalwood. That's where the photo was taken. The one that would outlive her. It was just one photo, a single click on a warm afternoon in 1969. Talitha stood barefoot in a silk caftan beside John, who wore a soft cashmere cloak. The sun glowed off the red tiles. The Atlas Mountains stood in the distance, hazy and ancient. She wasn't posing, she was just being herself. But that moment became immortal. Her look decades later. She hadn't just worn the clothes, she was the mood. But what the world saw as effortless was actually exhausting. The caftan that once felt like freedom had turned into a costume. The smile she wore in photos started to feel like armor. The parties kept coming, the pressure grew louder, and Talitha, the girl who once moved like smoke, started to disappear into it.
I woke up in the morning, it was just light. And he was sitting in a chair opposite my bed, just staring at me. And I shook my head because he looked like a drowned corpse. I mean, it was just really frightening to look at. I said,
as the 70s began, the dream was cracking. Behind the velvet curtains and candlelit dinners, Talitha and Paul were spiraling. He had fallen deeply into heroin, mostly addicted, detached, barely present. The sweet, quiet man she married had vanished. In his place was someone she couldn't recognize, someone she couldn't save. Desperate to hold on, Talitha tried to keep up. At first, it was casual, social. But heroin doesn't stay casual for long. She became thinner, moodier, and restless. The high society friends, the endless flow of drugs, the shallow conversations was all turning to smoke.
Paul, if you're trying to kill yourself, there are lots better ways you can do it. He said, I'm not trying to kill myself. And I said, well, that's what you're going to do. And he said to me, the trouble is, he said, that I'm just a name. And that's really all I have.
In early 1971, Talitha made a decision. She was going to leave Paul. She wanted out of the marriage, out of the shadow of the Getty name, out of the haze. She left Morocco and returned to Europe, moving between Paris and Rome, trying to get clean and start fresh. But the world she left behind wasn't done with her. So in July 1971, she returned to Rome. Some say it was to see Paul one last time. Others say she was reconsidering everything, maybe even giving the marriage another chance. They spent time together, stayed in the same apartment, and for a brief moment, it felt like old times. But old times came with old habits. And one night, they used heroin together. The next morning, Talitha didn't wake up. The housekeeper found her in the apartment, slumped in the bathroom, a needle nearby. She was just 30 years old. There was no suicide note, no goodbye. But there were signs, deep ones, that she was fighting something invisible, a kind of quiet sadness that no one close to her really understood. The press called it a tragedy. The fashion world mourned a muse. But for Paul Getty Jr., It was a collapse. He had already been falling apart, but losing Talitha sent him into full freefall. He buried himself even deeper in heroin, isolating from friends, family, even his young son. The parties ended. The palace in Marrakech stood empty, like a beautiful ruin. The golden couple was gone, both in their own way. Paul eventually resurfaced in the early 980s. He got clean after years in and out of rehab. The boy who had inherited a billion-dollar empire finally became a man who could face his grief. And when he did, he changed. He stopped chasing the spotlight. He started giving back, philanthropist, giving millions to arts and culture, AIDS research, and human rights efforts. It was a slow, steady act of rebuilding. Maybe it was redemption. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe he just didn't want Talitha's death to be the end of something. He wanted it to lead somewhere. Tara Getty was only a toddler when Talitha died. He was raised mostly away from the public eye, far from the family legacy. Today, he rarely speaks about his mother. Her name is mostly mentioned in fashion retrospectives or vintage coffee table books. The woman who once stood on a rooftop and defined a generation's style faded into myth, even to those who loved her most. But her image didn't disappear. That rooftop photo from 1969 never went out of style. It still floats across magazine pages and fashion blogs. It's reposted every summer, every festival season, every time someone wants to channel effortless glamour. She's there, forever young, forever barefoot, and forever wrapped in so made her a legend. But it also locked her in time. It made people forget that she was real, that she hurt, that she wanted more than to be looked at. Talitha Getty wasn't just a fashion icon. She was a woman trying to survive something much heavier than fabric and fame. Her story brings a thoughtful awareness to us that beauty doesn't make you safe, that even the most photographed women can feel invisible, and that style can dress a wound, but it can't heal it. She had everything that should make a person happy by the world's standards: money, fame, beauty, love, and still, it wasn't enough to save her. Talitha Getty didn't die because she was weak. She died because no one taught her how to survive a life people would kill for. What strikes you most about her story? Kindly let us know in the comments below. Like and subscribe.